What do I do with my life? If I were to get more theoretical and abstract, this question would probably be phrased as, what is the purpose of life? However, it's a very specific and loaded question, and one that's both very simple or very difficult to answer. Everyone asks themselves this question at least once, probably many times at some point in their life, or more likely than not, at each major junction in their life. If you were to pose this question to a young child, this question would more likely be phrased as, what do you want to be when you grow up? His or her answer would probably change a lot depending on his or her mood and also what stage of life they're at and whether they're graduating high school, going to college, coming out in the workforce, switching careers. If you told me that growing up my path would take so many turns, I would not have believed you. Let's take a quick look back. I've been a pianist, an actress, a model. I've worked in the media, finance, and online industries. I've been a writer, a teacher, and now a serial entrepreneur. It might seem like I've done a lot, right? But I'm actually not unique or notable for my experiences. There are many people who've explored myriad paths in their lives. This is not surprising because lifespans are increasing, and so are experiences and possibilities. And with all this possibility, this question keeps popping up. What do I do with my life? I'm still trying to answer the question. Which brings me to my central theme. Forget money. Time is the new currency. Now, in terms of history, we have now flown through the information age and have arrived definitively into what I call the communication revolution. We have seen the development and reign of social networks like Facebook, Twitter, Weibo, LinkedIn, and instantaneous real-time communication like WhatsApp, Line, WeChat, and so on and so forth. We live in a day and age of shortened communications and attention spans. All of this points to an overall lack of time. In fact, these so-called developments in technology and communications have both increased efficiency and expectations. It's sad, but people now expect you to do more within a shorter amount of time. And as we all know, there is never enough time in a day. So in the end, it's not about the dollar, the gold, or Bitcoin. It's about time. Because money comes and money goes. And with money, you can always spend it, save it, earn it back. With time, though, it's a different story. We all spend a lot of time, waste a lot of time, and you know what? You can never get it back. What does this all mean? Most people in developed societies are actually cash rich, meaning they have disposable income, and that they're time poor, meaning aside from getting through work and personal obligations and commitments, there is very little time left for themselves. So at this point, we actually have people who are asking themselves, what do I do with my life? And also realizing they have no time, even though they have longer lives and more possibilities. Is it any surprise that all of us are experiencing an identity crisis? Yes, that's right. If we categorize ourselves into brands and consumers, both consumers and brands who are trying to reach these consumers, we're all experiencing an identity crisis. And this brings me to the question of who am I? The identity crisis for consumers and the brands trying to reach them. On the one hand, you have the consumer. This modern-day consumer is ever sophisticated and ever evolving, which is to be expected because there's so much noise and they need to filter through all this noise. This consumer more often than not takes a convoluted path to purchase. He or she might start looking at an item in a physical store, then researching on a phone browser, then transacting on an iPad, finishing up their purchase on a desktop computer. Taste-wise, they are mixing and matching high street, luxury, and mass items. In fact, these consumers do not fit just one profile anymore. What's one thing they all have in common? Higher expectations. Their biggest expectations are twofold: product quality and value, and convenience, both in using the product and in purchasing product. On the other hand, you have the brands. Brands comprise both the ones that are old and established with storied histories and have been built for a few generations, and young, hungry brands that have arisen in the past decade. So if we were to look at these established brands, these brands are long-standing, have cachet and name brand value, but run the risk of becoming irrelevant and obsolete if they can't adapt, iterate, and change fast enough. And then you have the young and rising brands. These include the new hit technology companies, fast fashion, and fast-moving consumer goods, just to name a few categories. Now, all brands are struggling to be heard through all the noise that is being generated by all this extraneous communication and a competition to stay relevant. The brands that survive are the ones that are able to develop their own coherent voice and, by extension, their identity. These brands are the ones that are able to tell a story, generate excitement, resonate with their customers, and create value and revenues. This ongoing identity crisis amongst consumers and brands is the backdrop for what I'd like to call the rise and fall of retail. I've been to a lot of conferences, and at each one they're telling me that brick and mortar is dying. Well, this is a myth. The truth is that nowadays you need to have e-commerce and physical retail, or what I call clicks and bricks, as well as social commerce, as part of your online and offline retail framework. This begs the question, why does retail itself need to be so complicated? Remember, it's because the consumer is growing ever savvy and ever sophisticated. Successful retailers are everywhere their customers are. And since your target customer is easily distracted by noise, as well as choosing amongst a plethora of communication and channels, you need to be everywhere they might be. So long story short, you need to have a mix of different funnels and baskets to capture the consumer and guide them during their complicated path to purchase. You can achieve this conversion or a sale if you can properly unite digital, social, physical touchpoints. And as with retail and channel strategy, marketing strategy also needs to be a mix combining social media, online, traditional, PR, blogs, social media influencers, and so on and so forth. Finally, you must remember to pick your channels wisely. It's impossible to do every social media channel and to do it well. You run the risk, of course, of spreading yourself too thin. Now, underscoring all that I've talked about so far is actually the necessity these days of entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship is absolutely necessary in this day and age. It's no longer possible to survive working 9 to 5 and expecting to retire. People used to retire on pensions, but the social safety nets are quickly vanishing. People used to live and retire on rental income, but the real estate dream is no longer a reality for most people in the world, especially in developed cities. The best thing to do is to create a business that generates reasonable cash flow. Actually, the only way to build wealth and a legacy for yourself is to start your own company, business, venture, or project, whatever that may be. However, it's important to remember that not everyone is cut out to be a pure entrepreneur. In fact, most people are not this type, and they're unable to stomach the level of risk and commitment needed. I define a pure entrepreneur as someone who just goes for it, takes risks, who is visionary, and also is able to execute to achieve his or her goal, as well as motivate a team around them towards his vision. However, being labeled or calling yourself an entrepreneur is now a ubiquitous catchphrase. Everybody's an entrepreneur these days. You shouldn't be an entrepreneur because it's the, quote, cool thing to do, or because you don't want to work for someone else. As someone who's been at quite a few startups, and now and is a self-professed entrepreneur, I can tell you that being one is absolutely the loneliest thing in the world. You need to deal with everyone thinking you're absolutely insane. You need to deal with your own insecurities or voices telling you to doubt yourself. And frankly speaking, sometimes I can't sleep at night thinking of how can I run my company better or develop a different strategy or what else could I be doing different. I realize now that I might sound hypocritical or contradictory. You're probably sitting there asking, how is entrepreneurship completely necessary and yet most people shouldn't be entrepreneurs? However, even though I'm saying entrepreneurship is necessary and at the same time saying not everyone is cut out to be an entrepreneur, entrepreneurship itself is still necessary. In fact, entrepreneurship in and of itself is a value. Entrepreneurship as a value. I'm going to say something now that might be extremely shocking or unbelievable. Entrepreneurship and even being an entrepreneur is completely possible without being a founder and starting your own company. I would encourage you to take risks by working for and amongst people you admire as entrepreneurs. This is a way you can cut your teeth on entrepreneurship and actually train to be, or at least think like, an entrepreneur. In fact, every successful employee in every successful company needs to think like an entrepreneur. Like the livelihood of their coworkers and their company's vision rests upon their shoulders, because it does. This means operations need to keep things moving and working and running. Sales needs to bring in revenues. Marketing needs to understand their customer and entice and excite them. Finance needs to make sure the cash is flowing in, and etc. With everyone so busy, it's no longer a surprise that it's now become a 24-hour workday. There's no longer such a thing as a part-time job. You're always on the clock and answering emails or doing work or thinking, even if you aren't physically present. And there's no longer such a thing as work-life balance. It just doesn't exist anymore. Everything is all melding together. So we might as well just accept this new work-work balance with a thin sliver of life. However, that being said, you should try to keep your personal spheres differentiated from your business personas whenever possible. Finally, in order to achieve the value, entrepreneurship as a value, it's important to create value and share values with other individuals, brands, and partners. I'm constantly being asked when my next exit is. As cliche as it sounds, I think it's all about the journey, not the exit. So you shouldn't be building your company with the sole intention, mentality, or mindset to sell. Your focus should be on creating value for your customers, for your employees, and for society as a whole. It's also best to partner with like-minded brands to share your values. For example, my company mission is to empower women and to be an ethical, luxurious lifestyle brand for women, enabling them to live it, love it, glam it. For example, we've partnered with Her Fund, the Women's Foundation, Hong Kong Cancer Fund, Operation Santa Claus, Child Development Center, and so on and so forth. It's actually important to start CSR early and not as an afterthought or after the fact for a PR stunt. Also, we carry Indigo Africa, which is a brand that empowers women to create their own small businesses in Africa and to lift up their children's and families' lives. So as you can see, entrepreneurship is a very, very powerful thing, even amongst societies that are not quite as far along or developed. So this brings me full circle to the entrepreneurship mandate. Entrepreneurship is this generation's responsibility. The assets that we are able to create are businesses and jobs. If you want the world to be a better place, if you want to help people, if you want to create value, entrepreneurship is a right, duty, and finally, a privilege. And at the end of the day, if you don't choose to be an entrepreneur, you can choose to espouse entrepreneurial values and to think like an entrepreneur. Is it the right time? Everyone's always asking, is it the right time to do this? Is it the right time to do that? Well, Glam-it is my labor of love, and I consider it my baby, as do most passionate entrepreneurs and business people when you ask them about their companies and their projects. Some people have asked me when the best time is to have a baby or to start a company. The short answer is, it's never a good time. bringing me full circle to there's just never enough time.